guys, what's going on? It's Gunnar here. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk a little bit about some early season whitetail strategies that you can implement to have a more successful early season. Now, there's a handful of things that I'm looking at before I even consider making a sit or going out and hunting in the early season. I'm not a huge proponent in early season hunting just strictly because of the fact that I don't have a lot of areas that are high quality when it comes to early season. I pretty much strictly have excellent fall habitat, so my properties are highly attractive when these deer and these bucks get off of the summer habitat and they transition into the fall grounds. That's where my properties shine. From those summer months to the very early season, our opener here in Wisconsin is September 16th this year, so I'm not necessarily anticipating being out in the woods hunting much in September just because these properties that I'm hunting really shine when you get into those October months. As you can see, I'm getting a little rain shower here, but we're gonna keep this video rolling here. But there's a handful of things that I'm looking at. The first being food sources. Now, when I'm looking at food sources, I'm looking at those early fall food sources that these deer are prioritizing. That might be an alfalfa field, it could be a bean field, could be an apple tree. I've had a lot of deer that I've been dialed in on just before season that have been pounding apples. The only problem is apples only last so long. When you have so many deer hitting those highly attractive apples, they don't last long. That's the problem. That's why when I plant apples, I'm planting multiple trees to draw out that attraction period. So there's a handful of food sources that are superior in that early season time frame, that being alfalfa, beans, apple trees, could be a clover plot that you've got set up. That's why I like the idea of having these summer food plots, because I'm training my whitetail herd to have a consistent movement. So on this bean ear that I've mentioned to you guys, I'm creating that attraction already because these deer are wanting to hit these beans because in July, into August, into September, they're gonna be highly attractive. So if I can create a consistent movement where they already know there's a food source available in these plots, I'm creating that line of movement early. So in that early season, I already have that set up, that movement's already happening. Hey guys, what's going on? I just wanted to pop in here real quick and talk to you about a pretty cool event that I'm going to be attending here on July 15th. Now, Acres USA is putting on an on-farm intensive in Viroqua, Wisconsin, just right next door, talking about water management, water retention, cover cropping, and biological farming. Guys like Gary Zimmer and Mark Shepard are going to be speaking. And if you don't know who Gary is the founder of Midwestern Bioag, and he's also the godfather when it comes to cover cropping in the agricultural industry. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm talking about agriculture or farming, because I'm not a farmer, right? I'm a hunter and I'm a food plotter. But at the end of the day, a lot of the same concepts apply to both and overlap. On a much smaller scale, of course, with the food plots, but I've been personally starting to implement some of Gary's techniques and strategies when it comes to layering rye, using it as a weed suppressing cover crop in the springtime, retaining a lot of those spring rains and the moisture, and then using it for erosion control as well. So we're going to be talking about a lot of cool stuff. I'm going to be there 9 to 4, Viroqua, Wisconsin. I'll see you there. We'll talk shop. But when it comes to those early season sits, food's going to be your top priority. These deer aren't cruising looking for does yet. They're strictly on a bedding to food source movement, and they're not roaming very far. They're on that strict line of movement, going bedding to food, and they're not wasting a lot of time. They're prioritizing that evening movement, bedding to food. If you can capitalize on that, great. But if the property that you're hunting isn't necessarily set up for that early season time frame, it's going to be difficult to get on those deer if they're not on your property yet, because it is a fall driven property. But on the other hand, if I do have a movement that I'm trying to take advantage of, I've got a buck consistent, maybe I've got some cameras out, I've got intel that he's pretty consistent hitting this food source, he's in daylight, maybe I'm seeing him on my evening cruises, I know where he's coming out, I know the back corner. The first thing I'm looking for when it comes to actually going in and hunting is I'm looking for a cold front. If I don't have a cold front, I'm not going in there. I want a cold front strictly for the reason to almost guarantee that these deer, or this buck in specific, is going to be up on his feet in daylight hours. Say I have baseline 70-degree weather for a week straight, then all of a sudden it dips down into the mid-50s. You can guarantee that's going to be a night that I'm going to be out there. Maybe there's a rainstorm rolling in at 9 p.m. They're calling for a big storm that's supposed to hit right after dark. That's also a time that I'm going to be going in there and prioritizing a good evening movement, because that weather system's rolling in. You're probably going to have a drop in temp, maybe some higher winds, which isn't necessarily great for hunting conditions, but at the end of the day, any weather changes these deer are going to be up on their feet because they can sense weather a lot better than we as humans can. So any drop in temps, weather systems that are rolling in and out, I'm going to be prioritizing those days to go in and hunt that evening movement. Now, as far as where I'm going to be hunting, if I have the right conditions on a cold front night or a weather change, where am I going to be sitting? It all kind of depends on the location of where that deer's feeding. But at the end of the day, I'm not pushing in deep into the timber at all. I'm hunting strictly field edges because the last thing that I want to do in the early season is put pressure on my food source movement. That's the last thing I want to do. I'm playing it very safe in the early season. I'm strictly hunting those field edges, those inside corners. I'm not pushing down in near bedding at all because to me, these aren't high priority sits. These bucks aren't on their feet as much as they will be in the second, third week of October. And there's a lot of deer moving to those ag fields in the evening. So it's a lot easier to get busted when you're talking about attracting 15, 20 different deer, allowing all those does and fawns and those young bucks to be out in the field before that big boy gets up. That's a high risk sit. So I'm trying to play it as safe as possible, but at the same time, still have an opportunity to potentially harvest that buck or just see him. If he's feeding in an area that I can't necessarily get in and hunt him safely, that I feel confident that I'm not going to blow other deer out, I'm fine with just getting eyes on him, getting visible, understanding where he's coming from, what trails he's using. This is all intel because the season is just a matter of putting together puzzle pieces over the course of these weeks throughout the season to finally get that opportunity to learn a buck and then dial in on him and then make your move when it's the highest quality sit. So I'm taking very little risk when it comes to those early season sits. I'm sitting field edges, fence lines, inside corners just off an ag field, a hay field, bean field, whatever it may be. But I'm not getting aggressive at all when it comes to going in the timber, trying to hunt him in his bedding area. That's just a recipe for disaster, and it's unnecessary to put pressure on him and make him aware that he is being hunted right away early season. And a lot of the times, if I sit 1, 2, or maybe 3 times and I don't get an opportunity at that deer, I'm just gonna peel off. I'm gonna let that deer go. I'm going to wait until the conditions are right in that second, third week of October when the weather's getting colder, these bucks are starting to roll, checking doe bedding areas, cruising later into the morning hours. That's where my focus is when it comes to targeting big bucks. Now, there's a lot of different properties that are high quality when it comes to those early season sits. They're over mature timber, cool bedding areas, and they have those bachelor groups stacked up in their bedding and feeding right on that property. And sometimes that early season time period is the only time you really have a legit chance at getting a big buck. Because as those bachelor groups break up and those bucks start to shift and spread out, the one summer property that I've got isn't very good when it gets into that second, third week of October. Because they're off that food source. There's virtually no high stem count cover, so the bedding is very minimal. But in that early season time period, I do have that opportunity to slip in on a summer pattern that these bucks are still utilizing and potentially get an arrow in one. But the one deer that I'm looking for, he's not on that property, but I'm anticipating waiting for that first week of October and onward to really dial in on him and try to go and kill him. But as far as those early season sits, those summer bachelor group properties, I'm looking for a cold front. I'm looking for a high quality food source during that time frame. I'm hunting it very smart, field edges, inside corners, good pinch points, no bedding areas, very low impact, safe, smart hunting. Because this is a long season, the last thing I want to do is make these deer aware that they're being hunted and potentially screw up the opportunity to get on a deer when he's the most active that second, third week of October and then onward into November. So when it comes to the early season time period, I'm not necessarily going real aggressive when it comes to buck hunting. I might go in and try to do a little doe management. A lot of times I like to do that after the fact in the late season, muzzleloader season. We have doe seasons, holiday hunts here in Wisconsin, so that's a great time to do herd management, doe population control. But if I do want to go in and fine-tune some of my skills, get into that tree stand sitting mindset and dial in my setup when I'm up in the tree, I'll go in and I'll try to kill a couple does early season. But majority of the time, I'm waiting till that first, second, third week of October to go in and start hunting hard, just mainly because the properties that I am on aren't high quality until that time frame. This might be completely different for you. You might have an excellent early season property. You've got big ag. You might not have great fall cover and fall bedding. So that might be your only time period. You might have 2-3 weeks that's really high priority of you going in there and trying to kill one early, because after those bucks shift and start to spread out, the rest of that season isn't necessarily great odds for you. So it's all about understanding the property that you're hunting, what time frame that property shines, and taking advantage of that. So when it comes to those early season hunts, that's what I'm looking for. I'm not placing a lot of priority on those early season hunts because these properties aren't necessarily shining the brightest during that time. So I'm placing my priority on when this property is the best, and that's the first, second, third week of October when we got a lot of bucks rolling. I've got that good high quality cover. I've got a lot of topography as another form of cover. I've got fall food sources. I've got the bedding. And then at the same time, that low pressure, when a lot of the neighbors have been sliding in there trying to hunt hard that first couple weeks because they're impatient, I've been holding off. These properties are unpressured. These deer have no idea that they're being hunted. They're getting pushed from all around because they're feeling that human pressure during that early season time period, and they're stacking up on this unpressured land. And then when I come in there and start hunting at the peak times that this property shines, that's when success follows. So understanding your property, when it hunts the best, using these techniques to understand when is a good time to go in there to hunt, when's a good time to stay out, keeping that pressure to a minimum, and I guarantee you it'll help you keep that consistent movement with your deer herd, your hunting low impact, and your success rate when your property is the best will go up exponentially.